Hey guys, another video for you today. I played this game yesterday and I was actually going to record this one, but for some reason I didn't. I think it was a lack of coffee. That's what I'm blaming it on. And yeah, so this is, I feel, probably one of my most instructive videos as far as it, well, first off being my first non-game, non-live match video anyway. So I'm gonna have a little look at this. I'm playing black in this. My opponent is white. His name's R. Somadossi at ChessCube, and he's rated 1770 at the moment. He has been over 1800. So let's have a look at what happened. He played c4 and I played g6. I wasn't a big fan of this opening actually until quite recently. I used to play it a little bit, but I haven't played it in a while. So he plays knight f3 and bishop g7. So I'm just going to go over a couple of quick things here for maybe the beginner players or the lower rated guys out there, and just explain a little bit about what's going on here. So if you look on the internet, there are thousands of guides that tell you the main sort of strategies and ideas for the opening when you start off, and that is to control the center with your pawns a lot of the time, but also with your pieces. You want to get castles, get your rooks connected, and get your pieces on good squares. There are plenty more to that, but I'm just saying the main sort of few that I remember from playing a while ago. And a lot of those make total sense, and a lot of them, you know, you need to sort of always be wary of. So we're just going to have a little chat about this for the moment. I've played, the first thing as well, one of the first things it says is don't make too many pawn moves. Well, my opponent's made one, and I've made one. My opponent controls the centre here on d5 with this pawn move. So I'd say that controls the centre, so it ticks one box. He hasn't made too many pawn moves, and he's only made the one there, but it does do something. I made a pawn move. Does it control the centre? And remember the centre of these four squares here, and no, it doesn't. It doesn't control the centre there. And in fact, this is one of the reasons why I didn't like it so much early on. I was like, well, in fact, it doesn't stop the knight coming in either. So what does this do? And truthfully, it's purely to develop this bishop early on and create this fortress-like setup, which we will talk about in a bit. And I played bishop g7. I want you to have a look at bishop g7. Now let's have a look at going back to the principles again of controlling the centre. The square e5 and the square d4, those are the two squares in the centre that we can say the bishop is helping to control or contest for control of. Now again, forget the other squares it can go to, just the centre squares, just these four we're concentrating on for the moment. So bishop g7 contests for those two squares. Just like his knight that came out here contests for those two squares also. So this does tick that box at least. But there's one thing I want to share with especially the beginner guys out there. This is the modern defense that I'm playing, and this bishop here can become an absolute monster later on. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's have a look. What does this bishop do apart from control the center? What other squares does it attack? Well, it helps control f6. It's not the center, but it's close to our king, so that's good. It attacks c3, which is close to his king, I guess. But b2 and a1, these are the two key squares also we need to keep an eye on. Not just as ourselves as with the black pieces, but also with the player with the white pieces. And I'm going to flip the board a minute. Okay, so let's have a look at it from white for a second. Let's say white wants to develop normally. He may push d4 and then play bishop maybe to f4. And you might say, well, yeah, that's one way he can play, but couldn't he play something else? Well, he can, but let's just go with this for the minute. d4 and bishop to f4. Now, as soon as this bishop moves out the way, this pawn on b2 can become very weak. If he pushes the pawn forwards, just like this red arrow is showing, it's attacking the rook. So let's just flip back to our position again. So if this bishop manages to get to f4 or g5, or maybe even e3 in some cases, this bishop here can attack on this long diagonal, the pawn. If the pawn ever moves forward, like I was saying, the bishop then can take possibly this rook later on. So this bishop is something that not just us as a playing the black pieces, but the white player really has to keep an eye on. So we're gonna have a little look and say, yeah, okay, fine. Well, he could do that, but maybe he's a bit more, more wise to this. Maybe he'll play like knight to c3, b3, and then bishop to b2, and that will then attack our bishop at some point. And you're right, that is totally fine. But let's have a look why that may not be the best solution. It's totally playable, by the way, but it's a little slow. And the reason why is let's just play those moves for a moment. Let's just think it out. So knight goes to c3. We'll play maybe knight c6. So he's got two knights developed. We've got a knight and a bishop. He plays b3, and we'll play knight to f6. So now we've got three pieces developed. He's only got two. Then he'll go bishop to b2 maybe, and we can castle. So now we're closer and further ahead in development. We've now castled as well, and he hasn't. And remember, this bishop, if it ends up on b2 there, and the knight's on c3, it's actually not really protected by anything. As soon as that knight moves out of the way, the bishop can come under fire. So it means he has to move his rook as well, maybe to b1 to protect it. So he's going to have to make all these preparatory moves just for that. So it says that, if the game is very slow and there's barely any pawn moves pushed forward, it could be a plan that he wants to play at some point. But for now, let's just keep an eye on that. Let's just keep an eye and see how this works. There are grandmasters out there today, as a very new sort of school of thought, a new way of thinking, especially players like Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura from America, who is one of the top players in the world, and he's actually one of my favourites for his attacking style. I would absolutely love to play like he does. And what his sort of way of playing, and I know it's been done before, but I especially like the way he does it. It seems, to me at least, that this bishop, should become a monster in most games if white isn't careful, and that is true. But what Hikaru Nakamura does is he usually castles kingside, and then all of a sudden pushes his king pawns up to attack over here, and you think, well, how versatile is this opening? If you can do that as well. I mean, again, it's one of those things where it would be very nice to have all these ideas and know all the theory, but like I say, don't need to dwell on it for now, but it does show how versatile this opening can possibly be. So not only does this become a monster, I mean, maybe this gets shut out later, but there are other ideas then as well about pushing the pawns up. So this opening as a long-term strategy could be something worth looking at. So we're going to step forward through the moves here, and I'll try and explain a little bit about what's going on. So again, I'm going to move through these two. Okay, so he's played g3 and then bishop g2 with a very similar idea to what I've done opposite. g6 and then bishop g7, and it's to control this long diagonal as well. So now all of a sudden I'm the one who has to be wary of these white squares going down here, these light squares. So I don't want to be pushing this pawn forward easily, because once his knight jumps out the way, his bishop then will be attacking down here. And I think this is a very, very important point to make. I should possibly have explained this earlier. We'll go back a second though. So jumping back. If my knight comes here to f6, and he castles or does whatever he wants to do, and then I might jump with this knight later to attack something. So maybe I'm jumping here to e4, and that will attack the f2 pawn. Not only does it do that, not only does my knight move attack something, but all of a sudden I'm unleashing this bishop behind it as well. And the bishop might be taken on b2 or a1, and it gets very, very tactical maybe, but it can be something very, very strong for yourself. So picture this knight as maybe like on a springboard. As soon as that jumps to action, this bishop behind this deadly bishop can jump across this diagonal and possibly take what's on it. So it's something to keep in mind. So that's your little arsenal topper right there, that bishop on g7. So it's something to watch in your game, and something to watch if your opponent does it also in their game. So let's have a look. So bishop there, knight out. Why d6? Well, d6 gets my light square bishop possibly out to a good diagonal. Again, I don't want to be playing this one forwards, and I want to get my bishop out at some point. So d6 is quite a good move. Could I have played d5? I could have, but what am I doing here? I'm swapping an outside pawn And what I mean by an outside pawn, one that isn't a centre pawn. So only the D and E pawns are real centre pawns. The C pawn, B pawn and A pawn, and the same the other side, F, G and H pawn, are known as outside pawns. And if I'm pushing this up and he takes, it's usually better for the side who's got the outside pawn to swap it for an inside pawn. Why is that though? Why is that? Well, we will get onto this in another video, but just to touch on it at the moment, it is better to have a stronger centre of pawns for yourself rather than have your opponent with the strong centre pawns, because your pieces will have more freedom of movement behind it. So that's the main key thing to keep in mind at the moment. Like I say, we'll go more in depth on a lot of this later on, but this is something we need to just keep thinking about for now to explain what's going on. So castles, d4, so he's getting his pawn in the centre and he's developing, and I've castled, and I'm playing knight to d7. Quite normal for this sort of opening, but I will jump back a moment. What about this though? You know, you played here d6. Yeah, okay. So why wouldn't you just bring your bishop out? That might be a question you're asking, and it's something I want to answer straight away. Let's have a look. I'm going to take some moves here. Bishop h3. Bishop takes bishop. It's just losing a piece. Bishop g5. Yes, I'm attacking the knight, but it's not pinned to anything. It's not pinned to the queen. You know, the e pawn hasn't moved yet. So maybe he'll just push his pawn down to h3, and my knight's got to either move away, so it's a bit of a waste of time, or I've got to take the knight. In fact, he might just move the knight, and then all of a sudden my bishop looks terrible here. So I didn't want to choose that one. Bishop f5, probably my only other real option, which has got some sort of diagonal, but I'm kind of tempting my opponent to get a pawn in the middle here by playing rook to e1, to support this pawn and then push the pawn at me on e4 at some point. So I decided against that one. If I play e6, he can push d5, and all of a sudden my bishop's going to move again. So I decided maybe what's best to do is bring my knight to d7, because I'm not exactly sure where my pieces want to go yet. So I'm going to see if I can get him to dictate to me, him to make the weakness as to where I can move my pawn, my bishop to. All my pieces actually. So knight to d7 and knight to c3. Well, he still hasn't given me anywhere good to move this bishop to. So I play c6, and this has got two ideas. Basically what I'm doing is I'm what they call blunting this bishop a little. So remember I was telling you about these bishops, once they get in this sort of situation, you've got to keep an eye on them through the rest of the game. Well, this kind of takes the pressure off that a little, because now I'm sort of blocking it with these two pawns, blocking this diagonal a little. And also I'm contesting again for one of these centre squares. So that was the main idea there. So I know for a fact I'm not going to be bringing my bishop out this way anytime soon. I'm going to want to bring him out this way. That's how I'm thinking right now. So he plays rook over to b1. I think his idea should really be now b4, because, I mean, look, if he can get all these pawns in the middle and start coming at me, it's going to be very difficult for me to fight off in the long run. So I'm going to need to establish some sort of control in the middle. Otherwise, he's going to have all this space with his pawns. He's going to have all the pawns in the middle here controlling the squares, and I'm not going to have much at all. So I'm going to have very little central influence. So I play rook e8, getting ready to push now, maybe on e5 at some point. And he plays b3. I mean, it's this move I sort of thought for a moment, and maybe this is a little passive. I mean, you know, more aggressive would be like push b4, maybe b5 later, because you've got a rook behind it, you know, use it. But he's decided to play very solid and just push his bishop maybe to b2 or a3 later. I would have thought b2. But the one thing I've got to ask though, what is this little wall of pawns doing? Well, it's on a diagonal, so it's telling me instantly that by me actually moving my bishop to e6 at some point, what's it doing? It's looking at maybe 3 squares this way, but then all of a sudden I'm not really doing anything on this diagonal. So it's kind of helped me by saying, well, you don't want to be moving to e6 because you're not going to be getting much from it. Your piece isn't going to get very active from there. So I play, my next move is h6. It's kind of another little waiting move. Yes, it's true, I've moved the pawn in front of my king, but at the same time I've stopped him from jumping in. Maybe knight g5 or bishop g5 can get into a good square also. So I kind of ask him where he wants to put that bishop. He wants to go rook e1 because he's now looking to make the centre push. And I play e6. Now e6 is probably one of my favourite moves in this game. It may not be theoretically correct. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not theoretically correct. But I like it, and I'll explain why. This bishop here is meant to be his most powerful piece generally in these kind of openings. And I'd like to think that if I manage to support this light square here, I might be able to get my pawn there later and then blunt this bishop even further, so that bishop then doesn't look great at all on that diagonal. So that was my first thought. Some of you may be saying to me, yeah, but now you've blocked in your pieces as well. You know, you haven't got much room to move your bishop and things like that. Well, we'll see what happens in a moment. So he goes bishop to b2, and now I push d5. And the idea is, if pawn takes pawn here, if that takes there, I'll take back this way, and then all of a sudden, have a look at this bishop, it's freed. So it's got more scope again, back on this diagonal. Can he push though? Yes he can, but can I equally push? Yes I can. So there's still freedom and movement for these pieces to become alive. So it's like everything's just hiding around here, you know, just making my position slowly, you know, controlling some of the central squares. Yes, I am blocking this bishop in for the moment, so I'm not following all maybe the general principles of developing all your pieces to good squares. But I've certainly done a fair bit of that. I've got my bishop on g7, my knight's on f6, my other knight here is on d7, I've castled, I've got my rook on e8, so I've followed a lot of those principles. And I've also got a little bit of central control here as well. So let's see what happens. He takes in the centre and I take back. So now I've got this long diagonal again now open for my bishop, and his bishop, if we look at it, is just looking at maybe one square to go to here, one there, and one there, and that is all he has. So this monster bishop is no longer so monster. So let's have a look. I mean, at least for this move, it's not. So we're going to just forward through a little. Knight to f8. I like this because I'm probably going to jump maybe h7 and g5 to put some more control on this square, or maybe just going straight to e6 and maybe attacking this pawn later. So if white gets a little frivolous and wants to push e4, if I've got a knight here, this pawn could be looking very weak. So we'll just go forward, which he does do. And I take with this pawn. Remember, I'm still blunting the bishop here, so I don't mind giving this up for the moment. I've got some central control still. I have the bishop pair also, like I seem to have in all the videos I've made so far. So knight takes on e4, knight takes on e4, and this is one point I want to get to. Before I made this exchange, before I made this pawn takes pawn move here, I had to consider all the possibilities of where these pieces are going to end up. So I had to calculate all this, and some especially lower rated players, and I know I was exactly the same, I used to be able to think, well, I'll take and then he can take back, and that's it, that's where it ends. And truthfully, that's where I lost a lot of games, because it's not where it ends at all. If pawn takes and knight takes, I've got knight takes and he can play knight takes, and I've got rook takes and he can play rook takes. Yeah, there's a lot of things to think about, and then what am I doing after that exactly? Am I down material? So we've got to calculate all this. So I played pawn takes pawn, knight takes, rook takes, and this one was intriguing because instantly I saw, well, if he's got a rook here and he's got a rook here, these happen to be on the same diagonal, and my light square bishop hasn't been developed yet, but now he's almost tempting me to play bishop here, which would possibly have been a good move. However, I didn't play that, and the reason why is because I had a little look even further. If my bishop went to f5, he can play then rook takes rook, queen takes, and then all of a sudden he can move this rook away. So I'm not getting much else out of that. So I play rook takes rook here, knight takes, and now I pin with this bishop. So I play bishop to f5, pinning the knight to the rook. So if the knight moves away again, then he'll be dropping the rook, or he'll be dropping the knight if knight came to f6 for check. Maybe queen takes, and he's dropping the knight. So he defends that. Obviously, he's quite a good player, so he plays f3 to look after this knight. But let's have a look at the consequence of that. By playing f3, he's actually blocked his own bishop in anyway. So I mean, what is this bishop doing now? He can't come to h3 because I can just take him. Does he look good on f1? Possibly not. I mean, maybe it's good later on if he goes f1 and then maybe bishop to d3 later, or bishop c4 later. But I don't know if we're going to be able to give him the, I don't know if he's going to get the time to do that. So now I'm developing again now. Knight up to e6. And I'm attacking this a few times now. If we have a look, I've got a knight on it, I have a bishop on it, and I have my queen on it. He's only defending it with the queen and the bishop. And it's quite hard for him actually to defend this again, because this pawn here is isolated, which means it has no other pawns to back it up and look after it. There's no other pawns either side of it. So it's now on its own, and it's going to be very difficult then. If you've got a few of these isolated pawns in your position, you may have to think about giving one up just to get pieces developed and things like that. Again, these are all going to be in other videos I'll be doing, but it's something that we need to see as a weakness of the opponents. The opponents got this, and that was the reason now for knight e6, which I had in mind earlier for a different plan, but now it's coming in for this one, and that is the fact that he's got an isolated pawn here that can't be really protected very easily. He's got 2 defenders on it in the moment, but I have 3 attackers now. So how is he going to look after it? And he decides to sort of ignore that and attack my bishop. Well, remember, my bishop is, first off, hasn't got any squares to move to, but it's done a great job holding that knight where it is. So now let's just calculate this. After playing this move, I can play bishop takes knight, pawn takes bishop, otherwise he's lost a piece. Then I can play maybe bishop takes d4, which is attacking the bishop, but it's also saying check. So bishop takes check, bishop takes back, queen takes, and then all of a sudden it's check again. So he has to play queen takes, and then knight takes on here. So we'll just run through that again. Bishop takes knight. I think this actually happened in the game. Yeah, so bishop takes knight, pawn takes, bishop takes, which is check, and I'm hitting the bishop, so he has to take back, otherwise it's good for me, which he does. Queen takes, which is now check again, and I'm hitting his queen. So he plays queen takes, and I play knight takes, and I'm in a lot better position. I'm a pawn up, and he has this isolated pawn now. So all of a sudden, if you look at it, he's got an isolated pawn here. 4 out of 5 of his pawns are on light squares, which is the same colour as his bishop. So it's going to be very difficult for his bishop to get out of here in one move. He's got a rook that's sat over here looking after b3, but similarly I only have a rook on a8. My knight, however, is really dominant in the centre here. It's looking really good. And in fact, I might have some little tricks here as well, some little tactics. So let's see what happens. So in this game, there's been 2 sets of exchanges, and my opponent thought maybe he was okay at the end of both of them, where in fact, if you look at the resulting position now, and this is something we need to always do, just keep on calculating. You know, if you think you've gone far enough, you may not have. Just try another move or 2 and see what the position will end up like. I saw this position at the end of it, and I thought, well, this has got to be better for me. So I've played it, and I feel, looking at the material and things like that, I'm pretty sure this is a lot better for me. So he goes rook to b2. Notice rook to c1 here. He might be attacking that pawn, yeah, but it's already defended. But if he does play rook c1, then we do have things like knight to e2 check, picking the rook up. Also, we might have things like if he plays rook to attack the knight on d1, I can bring my rook over to d8 to defend it, and I'm still threatening to go to play a check at some point, knight to e2 check. And all of a sudden my rook that's on d8 is attacking this rook. So let's have a look what happened in the game. He played rook b2. I brought my knight back because I've seen a nice little square here I can get to, and I can also support it with this pawn at some point. So he brings his king in, which is very sensible. I bring my rook over to gain the open file. That was the other reason as well for playing knight here on to e6, is the fact that if he comes over to gain the open file, then I can swap it off with rook to d8. And after swapping off, I'll still be a pawn up. So it's an idea. I may not do that, but it's something we need to consider. Rook over, got the open file, and he's bringing his king up again now. Very good move. So I start bringing my king in. Yes, and here h4. He wants to try and get something going over here. He needs to move his pawns forward, just to get some sort of attack going and free this bishop up a little also. So I just try and define this pawn structure. How does he want to play this? I mean, if he takes and I take back, then his pawn is going to be stuck on this light square. So will he have to, I mean, it's that thing, will it be a liability later with him having the bishop on here, just having to try and defend that? Pawn takes, and pawn takes, he does, and now he's also given me a good square for me to set my knight on, defended by this pawn. So, and I jump to it straight away. And he brings the bishop down. By this point as well, just to let you guys know, I played these as 15-minute games, and I was running quite low on time at this point, so a lot of this had to be quite natural when I'm playing. So the move orders may not be perfect, but I'm pretty sure I'm doing what I can see that's probably better or winning for me. So I'm just going with what I can here. So f6, I want to just get this out of the line of fire of the bishop. And now he brings the rook over on my rook. I think now is the time to swap off. So I'm a pawn up. The king's moving away. I'm moving this bishop away also. That's purely just to attack the bishop, get it away. So at the moment now, if we look at where his bishop can go that's any good, can he go here? No, I can take it. Can he go here? No, I can take it with a knight as well. And he's only looking at that pawn. If he steps here, I can take it if I want to. If he steps here, again, it's the same. I could take if I want. I don't have to. And he can't go to that square. So his bishop is looking really, really terrible right now. And I don't really see many good plans for him. If he gets a bishop here, and then back here, and then over here, he's still only looking at this pawn. So realistically, I feel that this knight here is totally dominating the position. So I'm happy to swap rooks off and be a pawn up with that knight. So now I'm bringing my king into the middle. In the end game, you need to remember, guys, when you get down to this sort of setup, we might only have one minor piece, a few pawns, and a couple of kings on board. Yeah, so hopefully you've only got 2 kings in the game, otherwise you're playing some other game. I don't know what you're playing there. But yeah, basically, you want to remember that your king can also be an attacking piece. You know, don't be afraid to get your king involved. You know, there's no real threat of checkmate with just a lone bishop that can't go anywhere. Similarly with him though, I can't really just checkmate him with a knight. That can never be really done in this sort of position anyway, but we're going to get onto a lot of these sort of checkmate patterns at some point too. So king d6, a3, which is okay. I think maybe he has to play a4 really to try and get something going, but again, if he plays a4, I'll just play b4. And then this pawn on the light square is stuck there as well. So if you notice, I'm getting my king over this way a little. But truthfully, all I want to do is centralize this guy. And then I come, he jumps back. And now I'm kind of making a waiting move, but equally, exactly as this arrow is showing here, I want to jump in to c5 so I can attack this pawn, and I can attack this pawn. And I'm also threatening to jump back here as well. So it's a question of what does he do with all this. So he's kind of making a waiting move. What else can the bishop do? So knight in here now attacks the bishop, and he makes this mistake. He starts pushing the pawn, totally forgetting. I'm gonna actually, if you pause the video here as well, have a little think about what black can play in this position, which will mean a pretty much well, not pretty much. It will mean a definite winning position for black. Okay, if you've paused the video and you're back, or maybe you know all this already, that's fine. So I played knight takes bishop, which means the king has to take back, but he's stepped away now from the defense of this pawn. So that drops off. He decides to take over here. He thinks he still has some sort of chance with taking pawns. Maybe I won't see it. Like I say, I do have load time here. I think I've got about a minute or something, or a minute and a half, maybe more. I don't remember totally, but I take back. And yeah, he resigns here. Actually, he gives up. That was pretty much his only last shot if I missed it. So yeah, like the arrow shows, I'm threatening to go king over here and take this pawn. I can go king over here and take this pawn. Either way, 4 on 2 is not going to last long before I start promoting to queens. So yeah, I hope this was instructive, or a little instructive for you. If you've got any comments or questions as normal, please put them underneath the video. I'm really enjoying doing this, so hopefully it's working. If you guys can like and subscribe to the videos, that'll be amazing. That'll be really good. So yeah, until next time, really. Yeah, I'll catch you soon.